Alrighty, so I wanted to record a relatively short video, we'll see, for week 11, day 11 in our class, and our third Develop It. So this is the week that you will have that in front of you, and as has happened in the past, there's a schedule, so make sure you get on that schedule. Um, I am traveling the day after this is happening, so I'm trying to make sure we get those appointments done as soon as in the evening as we can. But just check that out. Make sure you get your name on the schedule. And remember, I start meeting on the Monday. That means this coming Monday for code reviews. And that is the requirements. And I haven't had anybody really ask me any questions I wasn't able to handle on the Learn Togethers. But what I want to go over in this video is just my progression I've made, just to show you on my site is I had, where I was doing my nearby. It still works. I have more tinkering I could do with it, but I decided to go ahead and integrate. Oh, before I get there, one thing I did do is I rewrote, refactored my call or my route. Right? So before I just implemented it using promises. The way it had really come from when we had done this work before, right? And this was fine. This was actually a good to integrate this and to figure out how, when things are, how to do a little validation. And this is one of the things, if you missed last night's class, we really talked about, and it was a good discussion about why this is important to do, which is really checking to see if these are passed into the endpoint, because this is server-side validation. And one of the things I was probably a little flip about when I did one of my little videos in week 10 was saying, well, you could just do the require on the HTML that is grabbing or collecting the data from the user. But one really important point, and that's why I was being a little flip, is that one edict you hear in web development is never trust the user input or the client side, because it's easy to be hacked. So that required attribute is easy to turn off. And so you want to have, the server side and the client side. So you make it easy and clear for the user to know what's not working, and you handle it on the server side ultimately, because let's say something happens. But really what I wanted to show you, and this is why I came here, is that I rewrote that nearby and callbacks just so it was the same format that we had seen him use when he implemented his weather app. And this was a really fun experience doing this because it wasn't that hard, right? So again, you do a little error checking, you make your first call, whatever your API call is, you pass it in whatever is passed in this query string, you have a callback and error or whatever came back as a result. If there's an error, you send that back, you stop execution. Otherwise, you make your next call. For me, it was nearby, passing in what I needed, lat long, and whatever the item was or thing they were looking for around them. And then what for me came back was an error, or in this case, I sent back an array. Okay, so that's what I ended up doing here. Now, this is what I ultimately sent back to the client, right? So this is when you do res.send, this is what gets sent back to that client code for it to display on the page. But before we go there, I just want to show you my nearby code, because the geocode is we've already seen that. And this code is really, right? So I'm setting up, I need lat and long coming in. I also have a search term they're looking for, and then of course the callback. So then making the request, right? Destructuring the what's coming back into body. And so what I did is, because I got multiple items as a result, I then took the body result, which is that multiple entries, which is a node list. So I actually set up an array, and then I iterated over there and pushed into that array the items that I wanted, and then I sent back on a success case, and this is a success case, I sent back my array. Okay, and where am I sending back is here, right? So this is coming in, and that's why this is places.res, and I could clean this naming up a little bit. But ultimately, this is what gets sent back, right, to the client. So in this case, that's what gets sent back to the code here for me to handle on this side. And so what I did here, and I actually changed this code a little bit, is if there's an error, output the error, else, right, give a message. And then what I did is I did a for each, iterated over that array that I sent back. And I created LIs, and then I populated each LI text content with whatever was on that current item that I'm iterating over. And then after each one, and then I appended it to the result, and that's on the DOM where I did the append child, and this places it on the DOM. Now there's actually a more efficient way I could have done this. I actually could have iterated over and then just done one append. That'd probably been much more efficient from a DOM perspective. But I just wanted to show you, like, this is the better way to do it. This still works. This is the other way I did it. I just left it in here to show you, right? And again, what we're talking about here is the idea of when you enter some information, that what comes back is the array, and then I iterate over that array to get that. Iterate over that array of items that came back so that I could display each one in an LI. And then on my actual form, right? So actually, let's go there just so you can see that. Oh, it's always, if this context switched a little bit here when you're looking at this, so I have to go into templates and into my HBS file. And so what I did here is I created a UL. And that's where I then, when I iterated over and I appended the child, that's where it was placed. So the only other thing I want to show you is that I did also, just because I wanted to show you the example, take one of my commands from my develop one, where I set up, this is the my Rio coin that I did for our develop one, where you have to get a username, you have to create a new member account. Right, so let's say I wanted to create Happy Camper, right? And I wanted to have an opening balance of $5,000, right? And so here it's been added, right? And so what I did here is I implemented by bringing in, and let me just close a few things so we can clearly see what this is. And I implemented it in the same way that we did by creating a form and then having that form, and I'll just show you this HBS file, right? So I created this form, and then I had the same thing where I had some areas in the form where I was pushing data into. But in this case, I decided, because I knew I was going to show you, to actually use a different local JS file. But it's the same idea of what I'm doing, which is grabbing the form, grabbing some field values. And this is just when somebody clicks into the field, it clears the data that was in there. And in this case, again, I'm calling a different endpoint with name and opening balance. And then if there's an error, pushing that out to the client. And if it's successful, then pushing just a message. But probably where you might want to see what is happening is on the server side. And one really good point that we were talking about last night is that, and this was Jared's point, is that naming app.js here when we're looking at it in source is better named server.js, because it may be confusing with the difference between what's running here and then what's running on the client side. Okay. So I just want to show you, though, what I did here is I created another route. Okay. I did some of that error checking again, and then I created a local variable inside of this route, and I called my Rio coin new member. And all that is that from dev1, I just brought it in, the module, into a local variable here. But basically that code is not any different. Maybe I changed a few things in the way it handled and sent things back, right? But that code is still the same basic function, right? So then I passed it in what came in off of the query string for the name and the opening balance. If I got back a string, I said it was a member, else I got back and something actually I could send back. I think I have to remember how that worked. But then I sent back an object to the client, basically saying that was added. So that's pretty, an example of how simple it might be if you're considering, right? I think most of you have decided your path of what you're going to follow for your Dev 3s. But I just wanted to give you an example that it's actually not that hard either to implement. And again, this is based on your Dev 1 work, but I just wanted to show you an example. So the last thing I will say, and I am traveling from the 28th until the 1st, but doesn't mean you can't email me. But I have set up the next coding, and I said last night the blocks that we're going to do is we're going to do the next 2 sections, and then we're going to have a next develop project. So in this case, this develop project may look a little different. I need to actually work through the second part, something I'll try to do as I'm traveling. We'll see how successful I am. But I wanted to show you that I've set up some ideas here, and I've actually created just a maybe this is what it looks like. Is it maybe instead of a traditional code review, we may just have a concepts discussion where you and I sit down and we see how well you garnered those concepts off those 2 sections that we're going to cover in the next 2 weeks after Develop It 3. Okay? All right. Just wanted to give you quick information. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you soon.